Welcome to All Ask the Questions Around Here, the podcast where we explore life's unexpected intersections. I'm your host, Dr. Joseph Elisha. Today, like always, we'll journey from the challenging conversations to the inspiring and lighthearted discussions that connect us all. Let's begin. So I want to start out by telling you a story. It's mid-October and my wife and I are doing our annual Boston fall trip. Boston is one of my favorite cities, one of our favorite cities. And we're walking on Newbury Street, Back Bay area. I happened to come across the Guild of Boston Artists. And I walk in, as usual, they have very beautiful pieces of art by a lot of different artists, and walk straight to the back. I came across this gallery that was dedicated to this one artist, and it brought me to a stop. I was looking at still lifes, pastels, the beauty and the serenity, and I want to say there was a certain magic in this particular type of still life that really stopped me in my tracks, and I couldn't wait for my wife to join me. And she came back. I showed her the pieces, and we really just sat there and were in awe of what we were seeing. On the face of it, we were looking at somewhat ordinary objects of life amidst pieces of antiques, antique plates, bowls, but fruit, other pieces of normal things that we use in our daily lives, but somehow they were rendered magical against this dark background. So we ended up buying that piece and brought it home. We have it displayed in a very beautiful area. I made it a mission to contact the artist, Robin Frisella, who has graciously accepted to be on my podcast. And here she is. I'd like to introduce Robin.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited. And I'm so grateful that you bought my piece and that it's hanging in your lovely home. That means so much to me.
Thank you, Robin. Robin, your art speaks of several things that are very special to me. Beauty, and I think you even mentioned this in your website. Beauty, hopefulness, serenity, and pieces of nostalgia. And part of my platform on my podcast is I talk about this thing called dropping the shades. And for me, that means that whenever I'm encountering something that requires contemplation, whether it's a stressful event, a piece of news, social media, an email that I need to respond to, something that is aiming to throw me off balance. And I have a process where I find a quiet spot. I turn off all the lights. I literally drop the shades and put on some music, usually something very nostalgic. And I have a lot of songs in my playlist that take me back to different points in time. That's a point of reset and a pause for me. Interestingly enough, your art, you call your art of stillness. So tell me a little bit about your why. Why did you start on this adventure?
Well, I never set out to be an artist. I was working one day and a woman came into my work and said, "Would you come take my pastel class at the local frame shop?" And I said, "Yes, I'd love to." My kids were off to college and I was looking for something different to do. And I really had no idea what it was, but I knew it was something I wanted to do. So I took her 12-week class, and right away I was just in love with the medium. And it took 12 weeks to do one painting, but I was hooked. And I called my children and I said, "This is what I'm going to do the rest of my life." And they're like, Mom, this is all you're talking about. You need to do this. And a few years later, my husband called me and said, "I have a little studio for you. Don't come now. I'm going to fix it all up." And it I quit my job and I started this journey and just broke all the rules from everything I had learned, even though it was like a wealth of information. And I just started painting every day. I'd go there 7 days a week, and it changed my whole life. And soon people started coming in and wanted to learn or to buy a piece. And I said, if you want to come, I set some times for classes, and they soon, became my family. And I learned as much from them as I think I shared with them. So it's just been a wonderful journey, and it keeps getting better and better.
Robin, what were you doing up to that point?
I was working at a copy center and trophy shop. I had been there because it was close to my children's school, and I was there for 18 years. Wasn't like, my dream job, but it was close and I could pick up my kids after school. And
Of course.
so,
But something pretty far removed from the creative process, right?
yes, for sure.
Had you always had that itch in you to do something creative like this and create a piece of art?
Well, I always loved to draw. As a kid, I colored constantly, and I didn't set out to be an artist, but I always knew I loved creating things, whether it was crafts or making baskets or drawing or whatever. I still never thought at that point that I would become an artist. It was just something I knew I could do, but didn't really practice or.
Robin, when you pick up a pastel stick and you're looking at a blank canvas, what part of you arrives first?
I think the part of me that arrives first is the part of me that's creative, because I am thrilled when I get to the canvas and I can turn a blank surface into some amazing, vibrant painting. And I guess that's what I would say arrives first.
Why still lives?
Well, when I started, I was painting landscapes, and I would say I have a very tight style. And for me, it didn't lend itself to landscapes. I felt like they should be looser. And at that point, it just wasn't in me to be painterly and loose. So I started doing portraits, and I love them, but I felt like could be very stressful. So I decided I'm going to set up still life. I get that same feeling from the still life, that it's like a portrait coming alive, and I didn't have the stress behind it. I started trying to tell a story with my pieces that I set up. Before long, they started selling, and it was just so exciting and made me want to keep going and see where I could take it.
Robin, what's your favorite object to paint and why?
I would have to say maybe anything vintage, like the old iron pottery or old dishes, but I also will add in some fruit or fabric or flowers to try to portray a timeless elegance. But I guess I keep going back to the white pictures because it just reminds me of home when I was a kid, and it just brings up a lot of different feelings. And I think it resonates with the viewers as well. And they find themselves feeling nostalgic or whatever. It might be like their grandmother's piece, or, that's part of what excites me, and to see how the viewers react. And
What's the most nostalgic object you've ever painted?
well, I think I have many of them, but one that stands out is my mother-in-law's butter churn. They had a farm, and they made everything from their garden and churned their butter. And she said, why don't you take some of my pieces and incorporate them in your still life? And it just I used her old dish towel and her bowls, and it just became one of my favorite pieces. And I called it It's Your Churn, and it sold right away. And it just got me so excited. And it just holds a lot of memories of her and their lifestyle, and just gives you a good feeling. And
Is that a recurring object in your work?
I haven't used it again in my work, but
Oh, really?
no, but because that was kind of a special piece that,
Yeah.
but someday I probably will revisit that piece. And
Do you find yourself going to like antique shops or like vintage stores and to find, old objects to include in your repertoire?
I do. I'm frequently um, combing the antique shops, and often pieces just jump out at me, like the white ironware, and their curves and their graceful beauty just like almost make me feel like it's like they're human, like they're women, like with the curves, and they just kind of speak to me, and they're waiting to be painted, and I can take them home and add whatever I want to the composition to make it my own, but still have that story of what was behind the picture, and you know the the stories that the picture would tell, like about gatherings or shared moments. And
When you're in the process of painting, and I know with pastels there's a lot of different layers that are involved, right? In that process, do you see the objects as they are, or is there an emotional component that kind of organically shows up in the process? How describe the process from an emotional standpoint for you?
well, when I'm starting, taking I set up by a sunlit window, and I'm taking a lot of photographs, like just to get different vantage points and see how the lighting plays. And you know it I could photograph this same paint setup 100 times and not feel anything, and all of a sudden the light is just perfect, and I've tweaked it, maybe an inch, but I get this feeling that comes over me, and I know this is it, and that's what I have to paint. And you know once that happens, I try to push it even more and make it my own. And I can play up the light, or know what to leave out and what's important in the painting. That's when it becomes emotional. And, I'm hoping that the viewer will have that same connection with the piece.
Do you always approach your canvas with the same subset of emotions and perspective? Do you have to, in other words, do you have to be in a certain frame of mind? Do you ever approach a canvas and say you have this certain overriding emotion that's kind of dictating the brush strokes, if you will?
Well, first, I have to feel a connection with the piece. And oftentimes, when I'm doing like commissions, people will show up with like 10 or 20 objects that don't even go together. And, they tell me they've been saving up for 10 years to get this still life. And I'm like, oh gosh, what am I going to do with these pieces? So at that point, I'll usually say, if you have a few hours and you want to spend some time with me, and, we'll come up with some different setups. And by the time we're done, I usually feel very good about the piece. And, you know, I have the liberty of putting my little spin on it. And they usually are very happy and usually start crying, or, you know, it's just such a nice feeling that I can take somebody's heirloom and add my little spin on it too.
I have a special fascination with Japanese art as well. And a lot of times, there's this concept of their art as a process of uncovering something as opposed to creating something. Do you feel like you're creating something or uncovering something that already existed? That's a tough question, I know.
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe a little bit of both. I'm not sure. I'm always, I don't know. Not sure I know how to answer that one.
I guess, like for me, when you're looking at a picture or you're looking at a set of objects, for example, that you're painting, in your mind, do you have a mental picture of the final product?
Yeah, I do. And sometimes it doesn't quite turn out that way, but more times than not, it turns out even better than I thought. And that's because in the last, I would say, 20% of the painting, I kind of try to make it my own and put my own little touches to it. And I have the right to play up the light or, lose an edge a little bit into darkness. And that's when it, becomes my own. And I get excited at that point.
Now, it's interesting in that, as an artist, you start with a creative process, and obviously it has now advanced into a commercial project, right? Where you're actually paid for your work. Do you ever develop a connection with your work after you're done with it, where you feel like, you know what, I don't think I want to part with this? Do you develop any sense of attachment to your work? I know you've called them your children.
Yeah, I feel like they're my children, but I do. Every new piece, I feel that attachment. And sometimes I hide them somewhere in my studio because I don't want people to come in and buy them because I want to get to the show and, get to show them and get to have time with them, like kind of like your children before they sell. And I mean, that part of it is kind of tricky, but I think as long as I get a little time to spend with each painting, I'm good with letting them go. And by doing these shows and getting to meet who's purchasing my work gives me a good feeling too, because often I'll go and hang the work or get to know the customer, and it's just like a really nice feeling to know that my work is in a lovely place that I feel good about.
Is the commercial aspect of your work ever a burden to you?
Well, sometimes I feel a little under pressure to keep up and produce, but sometimes that works in my favor as well, because sometimes I work better under pressure, and uh, it all works out in the end. But might start out a little stressful, but then as I get into the painting, I start to feel calm and good about it again.
Now, as opposed to, say, oil paintings, pastels can be subject to smudging or falling apart and crumbling. How do you protect against that? Or is that just part of the process?
Yeah, it is part of the process, but I'm constantly turning my piece so that, because pastel does smudge and it does drift, but it's a challenge, but it also can be a good thing because I'm putting 25 layers on sandpaper, and I just work those smudges and drifts into my next layers, and I'm constantly rotating my piece so that these little smudges and drifts go in a direction that I want them to, so they don't contaminate like a white area or somewhere that I couldn't layer on top and make it fresh again. So it has its challenges, but I'm so used to it. I know how to work it into the painting, and every layer just makes it more beautiful. And as far as the little crumbles and slivers, I save them all because they all have a purpose, and I can get in tight areas with those little slivers. Or so it's just you make it work, and it's all part of the beauty in the end.
Yeah, I was gonna say, do you ever leave any flaws or like a shadow or something or an unfinished edge or something in your work just because life's imperfect?
When I'm demoing for people, I always have one little section that I don't finish. And everybody's like, "Oh my God, leave it that way. That it's beautiful." And I feel that it is too. But I am such a perfectionist that
I was gonna ask you that.
it's very hard for me to leave it. And I mean, I have to try doing more of that. And because I get such a great response from that look. But for me, it's still very hard to not want to cover every inch of that sandpaper that I'm working on.
What's the overwhelming or the overriding emotion or feeling that you hope that people walk away with after viewing your work?
Well, I hope that they walk away and feel a sense of calm. One of the biggest compliments that I get is how my work is very calming and quiet, and people come in my booth and start crying, and I'm like, "Oh my gosh, what's going on?" And they're like, "Your work is just so comforting and just brings me back to my grandmother's home," or different spots in their life that it makes them feel good. And it wasn't my intention, but as time goes on, that's what really makes me want to keep creating, because it does conjure up so many feelings in the viewers, and their comments are just overwhelm me with joy, because it's like, it's not something you really set out to do, but it is just amazing how people see your work and how it makes them feel.
Does your work carry any moments or memories from your past or your childhood as a common thread?
For me, growing up was like magical. We didn't have a lot. My mother made everything seem special. Like if we had company, she put out the good dishes that probably had chips and cracks in them, but it felt, when we gathered around the table, it felt so special. And she made us all feel like we walked on water. And so when I see these antique vessels or old fabric like her tablecloths, or it just makes me feel good, and it brings back a lot of memories. And now the people that view my work, are they're so accepting of my work and say the nicest things that, like, it reminds me of my mom. Like, I feel like they act like I could walk on water, and that's exactly how she made me feel. And it's just like it's coming full circle. Like, so many of my customers remind me of my mom, not just her mannerism and her how she made me feel. And that is just such a wonderful feeling, and it makes me want to continue and make my work even stronger than it is. And
Robin, did you grow up in New Hampshire?
yes, I did.
What would you say is your go-to when life happens? Stress, you have something that you need to step away from to be able to recollect yourself or reconnect with yourself? What do you do in moments of stress?
I usually turn on my favorite music, which is country music, and I put myself in a room and just lose myself in my paintings, because even though you may start out like a little stressful, and before I'm halfway done, like the whole world falls away and I forget everything that's going on. And it just, I'll look at my watch and like 5 hours have gone by and it felt like minutes, because you just lose yourself in that moment, and kind of makes everything that might be stressful kind of fade away for a little bit.
One of the things that I've noticed about your work is when I'm looking at one of your pastels, I am forced to look at the objects because the background is just stark and black. Do you ever create any pieces where you have different points of focus, where the background is something else, or is that part of the signature of your work?
I do change it up occasionally, but once you've painted that dark background, it's just, for me, it's so like soothing. And I mean, I can lose part of the picture, into the background. And if I lay the background in first, I can pull some of that into the object. So when I change it up and try to go lighter or add something different, I don't get that same feeling that I do. And I do still, do them, but I don't feel like they have the same quality as the dark backgrounds. But people love them.
Yeah. Would you say that that is a very common feature of still lives?
Well, I think it is. I didn't study art history or anything, but I feel like it's kind of reminiscent of the old masters. And I think in my head, that's what I'm always going for. I love that, those subtleties of color change. And it's just very comforting for me. And even as I'm painting, and
How does your family react to your art?
they are my biggest fans, and they are my greatest support. They help me every step of the way, and I'm just so blessed. They are wonderful and very supportive. And I couldn't do it without them, because they are right there every minute waiting to help me load the truck, or making my brochures, or doing something to make it easier for me. And it's just, I'm grateful beyond words for them.
That was a very touching story you shared when you said that your husband informed you that he had gotten you a studio and that he was going to fix it up for you to work in. Envision yourself doing something else. Like if you were told you couldn't create pastels anymore, what would you do?
My other love is interior decorating. I would be designing homes or decorating for people. That's always been another love I have. And my daughter and I just designed our new home, and it's just absolutely beautiful. And that's something I could see myself doing down the road.
And you've been painting since 2000, is that right? So your kids were little.
Well, they were in college,
They're in
and
college.
yeah.
Yeah, at the time they kind of grew up with your art.
Well, I mean, not as young. While they were young, I didn't really do art. I did crafts more. Right. But they were right on board from the minute I told them about how much I love this. They were carrying little brag books to college with them to show their friends, and so supportive. And it's just, melts my heart that how the great support that I had from my family and my parents.
In what way has your art evolved over the years? Would you say your technique or maybe your subject matter? Has your subject matter changed much?
My subject matter has kind of been the same. It's just I feel like I'm hoping that I'm growing and making each piece better than the last. And that's the change I see in my work. And um, I don't know.
When you sit down and are in the actual creative process, do you have any awareness of the world around you?
Not once I get painting. I feel like I lose myself in each painting, and I feel like our paintings are a little piece of our personality, and uh, I don't know. I just get lost in it, and for a short time, I forget what's going on in the world, and it just takes me away to another place.
You would describe yourself as someone who's usually still hopeful and nostalgic.
Yeah. I grew up very shy and very quiet. And when I started painting and I was asked to do demos and get up and speak in front of people. And I thought, oh gosh, I could never do that. But the more I got comfortable with my painting and I started getting up in front of large crowds, and it's like it changed my whole life. I felt such a passion about the pastels, and it made it easier for me to get up and speak in front of people and share my process. And I feel like this journey has changed my whole life for the better.
It's interesting because and you may relate to this as well, if I'm reading you correctly, that you're probably an introvert.
Yeah. I mean, I love people, and I love being around people. That's why I continue to do shows where I'm interacting with people, but I am very quiet and I do keep to myself.
So the same thing I think probably applies to me because when I consider myself an introvert and but when I'm in front of a microphone and when I'm podcasting, I'm kind of projecting out. And so it's it's a it's a different type of a creative outlet for me when I do that. And of course in my job I can't be an introvert because I have to interact with people in the operating room and whatnot. I'm an anesthesiologist by training. So it's a very interesting kind of a paradox for me because I have different roles. But going back to your pastels, if there was a single message that you wanted your body of work to convey to future generations, Robin, what would that be?
I guess just to slow down and pause and, reflect on the beauty that's around us because, the world is, changing, and it's going by so quick that we forget to stop and enjoy the beautiful things, that everyday objects that are around us. And hopefully, people will take time to stop and reflect and, you know, just enjoy the beauty and the stillness.
Robin, if in your evolution as an artist, do you ever have periods of time where you started to doubt your talent and think to yourself, you know what, I don't know what I'm doing? And did those thoughts ever invade your mind?
They do invade my mind often, but, I paint alone every day in my studio and, just lost in my little space. But and I sometimes second guess myself, but then I go to a show and the response that I get from the viewers is so amazing. And I have made lifelong friends with a lot of these people, and they invite me to their home, and they'll fly to my gallery from another state to see my work. And it's like, oh my God, I must be doing something right. So I do doubt myself, but that kind of brings me back and, reassures me why I'm doing what I do, because it's just the most amazing experience. And the way they make me feel, and hopefully the way my work makes them feel, is just as special.
Have you ever had any negative feedback about your work or criticism or?
The only thing that I would say anyone has ever said was, when are you going to loosen up? And I'm like, at first it would kind of make me feel bad and think, oh, should I change my style? But my work has been in every magazine and won every award. And I feel like you have to do what's in your heart if you're going to love it. And I'm painting for me, first of all. And if I can make other people happy along the way, that's like the bonus. And that's what keeps me going. And that's what it's all about. You should do what's in your heart if you're going to love it. And that's what I try to do.
Which brings me back to the final question. And I think I know the answer to this. Would you feel any differently if you couldn't sell a single piece of art moving forward?
I probably wouldn't, because I just love it no matter what. I mean, I do it because I love it, and selling art along the way is like the bonus. But it is very healing for people. Like when I taught classes, that many of the people had cancer or chronic pain, and they came every day and never missed a class. And we'd all like kind of forget the world for those 2 hours. And it is such a healing process that I would do it no matter what, because it's just good for the soul and it makes me happy.
Robin, I've thrown a whole bunch of questions at you. Do you have any questions for me? I'm very grateful for the time that you've given me today. I've learned so much about you, and your gallery is definitely on our list of places to visit when we go back to the East Coast next fall. So,
well, I don't know if I have any questions, but I would look forward to your visit, and would love to show you my process if you ever come. And
I would love to see that.
Anybody who stops by, if they have a few extra minutes, I'll show them a quick my process, and they just start crying, and they just can't believe that how this is done. And it's just so rewarding for me. And so I hope someday you do get to visit. And
we will next fall. Robin, thank you so much. I really appreciate the time you've given me, and now that I've spoken with you, I feel like I have such a deeper connection to your pastel in our house, and I'm very grateful for that. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm very grateful for you, and I'm so glad you chose my piece.
Same. Thank you, Robin. That brings us to the end of another episode of All Ask the Questions Around Here. I'm Dr. Elisha, and I hope today's conversation gave you something to reflect on and perhaps something to smile about. If you enjoy what you heard, please subscribe wherever you get your podcasts, and join us next week for another journey through life's complexities and comforts.